Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Beautiful. That's that message today about that Tony just sang about being of service. Like, I'm out of the way. There's space for you to use me for good, that I can serve other people. That is so necessary. You know, our teaching is that we are one with God and one with each other. And if we are really showing up as the truth of who we are, that separating egoic mind has no place in that. And we are here to serve. But some of you may be going, but I thought unity was where I got my stuff. You know, that's where I learned to, aren't we doing prosperity? Isn't that what we're doing? Isn't it about me getting what I need? Yes. See, there's no separation here, that as we heal our own lives, we become more available to be a presence for good in the world. That we get our needs met, we get our healing, and we become a healing presence. Amen? So it's both and, it's not either or. That's really what we're talking about today. This is week 4 of our spiritual economics series, and it is about how we can, by healing our own consciousness of prosperity and abundance, we begin to raise human consciousness everywhere. But first, let me tell you about Mark, who had just retired. And he's having a party to celebrate his retirement, and his parish priest, Father James, came over and said, "Now, Mark, I'm really glad that you've gotten your earthly affairs all put together and you've got all the money you need for retirement, but I think it's time that you start thinking about the hereafter." And Mark said, "Well, Father, I do think about the hereafter every day. I'll find myself in the kitchen or in the living room or in the garage, and I think, what did I come in here after?" Can I get an amen if you've been there? Yes, you know about that. I heard another comic, Rita Rudner is a comic I saw in Las Vegas one time, and she said, "I don't think I'm getting Alzheimer's, but I do have the what did I come in this room for Heimers." So we're talking today about a new world vision, that we look beyond our own personal healing and we look to the healing of humanity's consciousness. When I first got to this teaching, I was really in sad shape, I will tell you. And I began to take the classes and come to the services, and I was told that my problems were not because people had done things to me. They said, your problems are about your own consciousness, like your thinking is attracting your experience. I said, no, I think you are mistaken. Because let me tell you my story. And I'll tell you why it's so hard and why I'm struggling so much. And underneath all my stories was a feeling of unworthiness and I'm not good enough. But that was my consciousness, and so I had attracted that. And I began to practice and take these classes, and then I was told that what I need to do is heal my false beliefs. That my belief system, my BS, as you know I like to say, was faulty, that I believed incorrect things about myself, about God, about the universe, about other people, that I was believing lies. And one of my favorite teachers in the science of mind, Reverend Dr. Kathy Hearn, she said this to me one time. She said, "Michael, when we heal a false belief, we heal it not only for ourselves, but for all people, past and future." When we heal a false belief, whatever your feeling or belief is around health, well-being, peace, whatever it is, when we heal our false belief that we are, something ripples out, that there are waves of healing that then reverberate through humanity. And we know actually there is no past or future in God. Time is a construct that exists within spirit, but there is only now. And so it's a healing agency for all time and for all people. And this is the premise, is that the word I'm looking for? Yes. That Eric Butterworth is using in this final chapter of his great book, Spiritual Economics. That our healing is not selfish healing. That our healing is about raising something of generosity, of good, out in all of humanity. In the Gospel of John, there's a verse, chapter 12, verse 38, where it says that if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. Recently, I was listening to a podcast by Father Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan, a very, I believe, an evolved soul, and his teaching is incredibly universal. It's very unity, very in compatibility with unity. And he talked, his most recent book is called The Universal Christ. And he says this, if you're reading the first three Gospels in the New Testament, the Christian Bible, they're really talking about the life and the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, the man. But the Gospel of John is different. It's much more mystical in its tone. It came later, and he said if you read statements by Jesus in this fourth Gospel, it's actually the universal Christ that is speaking. And so when the text says that if I be lifted up, I draw all men unto me, that's not just Jesus speaking around the Sea of Galilee 2,000 years ago. That is in us too. That if the Christ awareness of oneness and connection and love and abundance and power and peace and beauty and joy, if that be lifted up in us, it radiates, it attracts, it brings more energy like it into existence, into experience. Can you get that? Yeah. Amen. Thank you very much. You know, the 9 o'clock service, I love them, but they're a little quiet. So this morning, I appreciate it. I like a little feedback. My friend Kim King, she likes to say it this way, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So that's what we want to do. We want to heal our own consciousness and recognize that we are contributing to this thing called the collective consciousness of humanity. That's what it's about. So, we're right back where we started from in this 4-week series on prosperity consciousness, on the spiritual economics, is consciousness is cause. Consciousness is our awareness, the sum total of our thoughts and beliefs and our perspective on reality. And that if we can shift, raise, heal, elevate our consciousness, then life shows up for us differently. And we do this not only for ourselves, but we do it for others as well. If we can see people differently, we are different, and they are different too because of our seeing. Jesus spoke about this in the Gospel of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount, which most biblical scholars say that this is most probably like what he would actually have said because of the historical nature of it. It shows up in different places, but this teaching, and it was radical for its time, and it amazingly evolved when Jesus said, "Judge not, lest you be judged." That is, it's a very sophisticated psychological concept that didn't actually show up until the 19th and 20th century with Carl Jung. It's called projection. And Jesus was talking about it over 2,000 years ago, that we're seeing what we're being. And so, I love it too when Master Teacher Jesus said, why would you try and remove the speck from your brother's eyes when you have a log in your own? That's pretty direct, isn't it? And you know, if you have a log in your eye, what are you going to see when you're out in the world? Wood everywhere. I can see it in you, and I can see it in you, I can see it in you. The thing that I'm believing, the thing that I am misbelieving or misunderstanding about reality of the universe, I'm seeing it everywhere. And when I do that work of healing it here, I can not only feel more freedom and power available to me in my personal life, but I see you differently, and I'm going to show up differently for you. And that ripples out. Chaos theory in science today talks about the interconnectedness of all things in such a way that if a butterfly flaps its wings in South America, it can cause a hurricane in Japan. That's kind of a negative, I know, but you get the idea that things, there are cascade effects, that things just ripple out and continue to cause other things to happen. And this is what happens with the negative things that we see showing up in humanity today. People believe in scarcity and separation and againstness, and so that ripples out as well. And our job, our calling, what we are here to be in unity, is to be that light of possibility and connection, of abundance and well-being. That's why we come together on Sundays, so we can remember it about ourselves and for each other. And your seeing of humanity changes people. I'm going to tell you a story about a young girl in Arkansas. A young African-American girl. She lived in a tiny town, as most towns were back in that day. They were segregated, and her grandmother, ran the grocery store on the black side of town. One day, a woman came into the grocery store. Her name was Bertha Flowers. This young woman, this is a memoir that she wrote. Her name was Marguerite, and she had such love and respect for Miss Flowers, and she was always impeccably dressed, always spoke beautifully. Said she never saw her laugh, but she smiled often. And when she smiled at me, I wanted to say thank you. There was a generosity in her presence. She was a teacher. Well, young Marguerite had experienced some very difficult things. She had experienced sexual and physical abuse in her family. And it had caused her to shut down, and she stopped speaking. Very brilliant mind, but couldn't speak for many years, didn't speak. And Mrs. Flowers knew about this. And so one day she comes into Marguerite's grandmother's store, and she bought her groceries, and Marguerite's grandmother said, well, I'll send these on home with my other grandson. He'll take them to your house. And Miss Flowers said, no, I would like Marguerite to bring them now. And so Marguerite grabbed the groceries. They start walking along the path back to Mrs. Flowers' house, and Mrs. Flowers began to speak to her. She was a teacher, as I said, and she didn't teach Marguerite, but she had talked to some of the other teachers, and she said, I've heard that you're not speaking, and that's okay. I want to quote this directly from Marguerite's memoir. Now, no one is going to make you talk. Possibly no one can. But bear in mind, language is man's way of communicating with his fellow man, and it is language alone which separates him from the lower animals. Marguerite writes, that was such a new idea to me, I would need time to think about that. Your grandmother says you read a lot, every chance you get, and that's good, but not good enough. Words mean more when what is true is set down, when it's more than just set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with shades of deeper meaning. Marguerite writes, I memorized the part about the human voice infusing words. It seemed so valid and important. They go back to Mrs. Flowers' house, and Mrs. Flowers had planned this meeting. She had baked cookies and made lemonade. And she sat Marguerite down and said, I know you're bright, and I know you love to read, so I'm going to loan you some of my books, and you better take care of them. I don't want them returned with a tear or a scratch. And Marguerite said, I would rather die than return Mrs. Flowers' book with a tear or a scratch. And she said, I'm also going to give you this book of poems, and next week when you come back to my house, I want you to recite one to me. And this relationship of this wise older woman who saw something in this young girl and invested into it. That young girl named Marguerite became known to all of us as Maya Angelou. And if you think about, can you imagine another human voice with more shades of meaning as she would speak her poetry or just say anything? I remember I saw her on Oprah one time, and she was talking about buying peppers at the grocery store, and I cried. It was so beautiful. What a soul. And what if Bertha Flowers had not seen her correctly, past her woundedness, past her fear, and had not been willing to show up for her differently? That's the power of our seeing. That's the power of raising our own consciousness. Because here's the thing I want to tell you. When we heal ourselves, we are going to show up differently. We're going to act differently. We're going to speak differently. It's not just enough to see. We're going to be called into some kind of an interaction, some way of being with people. And so that brings the question to me now is like, what is mine to do for this mess that we are in humanity? What's my part of healing it? Because it's more, I know, that I'm going to be able to solve in my lifetime on my own. Amen? And sometimes in metaphysics, we want there to be sort of magical solutions that just kind of parachute down from heaven and just take care of everything. If your consciousness is there, more power to you. But all of the big shifts that I've had in my life through metaphysical teaching and practice, I changed. I changed my beliefs, I changed my thinking, I changed my words, my speaking, and I changed what I did. And then I got different results. It's really what Paul talked about in Hebrews, where he said, faith without works is dead. The faith without works really isn't faith, because nothing has really changed. So we are called to step into being differently. I want to tell you, too, about the way you're seeing people. If you're judging them, you can't see them. Do I need to say it again? If you're judging someone, you can't see them, because what you're judging is some aspect of their behavior or their own broken consciousness, and that's all you're seeing. You're not seeing underneath it to the child of God that is alive there, but maybe forgotten, like it was in Marguerite, Maya Angelou. And with our political divisions, it's really easy to just otherize, because people are doing foolish things. No matter which side you're on, you're seeing foolish things done by the other side. And what we're being called to do is to remember our common humanity and divinity. In Hinduism, there is a practice of namaste. If you've ever been to yoga class in the last 30 years, you know it. This salute where we place the hands in prayer position and we bow and say the word namaste, which is Sanskrit. The best translation is like the divine that is resident and alive within me sees, recognizes, and honors the divine that is resident within you. The Christ in me sees and honors the Christ in you. And that's what we're called to do. And it's hard. I'm just going to tell you right now, especially on the freeway like I like to talk about, but also at the intersection when our homeless population are there panhandling. I've talked about this before too. We don't want to look them in the eye. And that's our stuff. That we don't want to believe that it's possible for a human to be so downtrodden, so needy that they're asking a stranger for something. But what I'm asking myself to do, and you're welcome to practice this too, is greet them with a smile, look them in the eye, and recognize their humanity. Now, I don't give money to panhandlers. I've been educated that may not be the best thing to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do about that, that there are other ways, that there are systems in place that we can support people. But I'm not going to look away, and it's hard. But I look them in the eye through their pain, and I remember who they are. So, what do we do as a community? We've been in the process probably about 8 years now since some of our most dedicated volunteer leaders said, we can be doing more to serve the neighborhood around here. And so Unity in the Community was born, and now we are out there partnering with other organizations. We're feeding the hungry. We're working to support this beautiful school over here south of Richmond, Pilgrim Academy, because if there's anything that's going to change in people's lives, education will get them there. So we want to support these things, because you know the old adage, you can give a man a fish and he's hungry. You know what I'm saying. He's fed for a day. But if you teach him to fish, he's fed for a lifetime. So we want to be a beneficial presence. Yesterday we had our amazing Living for Resources fair, where we're putting people in touch with, people in need in touch with their supply. That's our prosperity teaching in action, to serve others. We're finding ways to bring people about. In the book, Eric Butterworth talks about a study that was done and where they took people that were really poverty-stricken and without work, and they worked not on job skills, but on self-assessment, self-image, just shored them up on who they were, and 80% of those people, after a 2-week class, went out and found work. That's what we can do. So I don't know what is yours to do. I don't know if you're looking for a place to be a beneficial presence in the world, we give you plenty of opportunities to step into service that way. I do know that there is something, no matter how much healing work you still have to do on your own, there's some way that you can be available to God to serve others. That's why we're here. We want to be better. We want to lift humanity up. At the end of this chapter, it's actually at the end of the book, in this chapter, Butterworth says this: become a part of a new worldwide epidemic of faith. Faith in the conviction that there is no need for poverty or lack anywhere. And then he quotes Charles Fillmore. I want to read this paragraph from Fillmore. And just see if this sparks your consciousness in any way. In the new era, now at its dawn, we shall have a spirit of prosperity. The principle of the universal substance will be known and acted upon, and there will be no place for lack. Supply will be more equalized. There will not be millions of bushels of wheat stored in musty warehouses while people go hungry. There will be no overproduction or underconsumption of other inequities of supply, for God's substance will be recognized and used by all people. Men will not pile up fortunes one day and lose them the next, for they will not fear the integrity of their neighbors. Is this an impractical utopia? The answer depends on you. Just as soon as you individually do your part in the quickening consciousness of the whole economy. There's power in that. That we are all here to heal our minds, to heal our hearts, and in small, beautiful ways, heal the world. I want to leave you with this. You've heard it probably a million times, but the starfish. There's a high tide that had come and had stranded tens of thousands of starfish on a beach, and a young boy was seen taking the starfish and throwing them back into the sea. An older man comes up to him and says, "It's hopeless. You're not making any difference." And the young boy picked up a starfish and said, "I'm making a difference to this one." There's somebody who's just waiting for you to see the truth of who they are. That's making a difference. This is also at the end of the book, quoted by Butterworth, Canon Farrar. "I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do, and what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do." Thank you for being in a community that is so loving and supportive of healing the consciousness of humanity. If no one has told you today that they love you, I love you. Where's Olivia? Come on up here. Come on up here. I want to introduce you to Olivia Ozanne.
Hello.
I wanted her to share something she shared with me a couple weeks ago. This is I'm not going to ask how old you are, but she's young. And she was sharing with me how impactful this teaching has been on her life and what she has created by using these principles. Take it away. It's all you.
Cool. Hello, Unity family. So when Reverend Michael Gott asked me to do a talk on manifestation today, I was super excited, but also very tickled because I had literally just placed public speaking on my vision board 2 weeks prior to the day. So you guys are quite literally experiencing a live manifestation of mine. So I began... So I began coming to Unity in 2017, and I became obsessed with the teachings about love and acceptance and co-creating with the universe. I was floating on a cloud, so much so to where one day my parents jokingly asked me, "Are you in a cult?" Hi, Mom and Dad, they're members now. So it was really divine timing because I didn't realize it at the time, but my life was about to get pretty hectic. I'd gotten engaged a few months later, and then we got pregnant, and then I came to the realization that the person that I was with was not the right fit for my life. See, you have to be really careful coming to Unity because these ministers will have you realizing your worth and your potential, and that you shouldn't be treated any less special than the Creator says that you are. And so I left. I had no idea what was ahead of us because at the time I was a struggling, albeit very passionate, full-time entrepreneur. And so in November I gave birth to my beautiful baby boy Marley, a ball of energy and with the wildest curly hair. I had manifested my dream baby. And so using the techniques I learned at Unity by incorporating meditation into my life to find my inner peace, in order to hear messages from my guides so that I could take inspired action, and acting as if, and using affirmative prayer, I came to the realization that I really could call into existence whatever my little heart desired. And so a couple months later, I got into the #1 coding boot camp in the country, and I worked my butt off day and night. And 1 week before I graduated, I had manifested my dream job as a software engineer at a biotechnology lab here in Houston. And when I got into a car accident and my car was totaled, I didn't freak out. I stayed positive. I kept my vibes high. And I knew that this was happening for me and not to me. And 2 weeks later, I had manifested my dream Volkswagen Jetta down to the beige leather seats I had envisioned. That one. So I was on a roll. So I asked myself, Olivia, what is it that you want next? And so I decided to go big. On July 9th, I crafted a list of all the elements that I wanted out of my dream home. And I told myself, I'll manifest this one day, but probably not anytime soon. Because while the money was there, my time as an entrepreneur had did a toll on my credit. So one night over at, so there's the list right there. One night over at a realtor friend's house for dinner, we were tinkering around and just playing around and looking at listings. And so at a certain point, she turned her laptop screen around to show me a listing, and my mouth dropped. That was my home. The open concept, the modern vibe, down to the exact bathroom that I had wanted, that I had placed down on my list. That was it. And so I said to myself, you'll never get approved for this. And then I remembered, it's not my job to figure out the how. That's none of my business. My job is just to visualize exactly what it is that I want and to have fun with that. And so here I am the very next month in August, signing the contract to purchasing that very home. And so in the past year, yes, all of these manifestations happened in 1 year. I came to realize a few very important things. That God is a God of many names, but in its highest form, his name is love. We are called to love ourselves so intensely that we realize just how great that we are. That it is not selfish for us to want to use these techniques in order to manifest our greatest desires. That it is not only our birthright to live a life of abundance, that it is our duty. It is our duty to raise our vibration so high that we ultimately raise the collective frequency of this universe and help to heal this world. When I left my conception partner at 3 months pregnant, I knew that we'd be fine, but I had absolutely no idea just how good life was about to get. And so I'd like to express gratitude to Reverend Michael and to the Unity ministers for all of your love and support and for allowing me to share my story today. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.